Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
A big thanks to our sponsors who make the pudding possible. The American Camp Association of Illinois is made up of nearly 289,000 members, volunteers, campers, families, and professionals who believe in the power of camp. They work to disrupt the effects of poverty by providing fundamental services for children and families and learning opportunities for camp professionals. Learn more about ACA Illinois by visiting acail.org. You know the impact you want to make in a child's life, but figuring out the day-to-day details can be overwhelming. Let Camptivities help you make that impact by streamlining the creation of your camp activity schedules. Schedule a demo at camptivities.com.
Welcome to the pudding.
The sweet proof of research to back up what you already know about summer camp.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mandi Baker. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Travis Allison, he, him. And today we're going to explore the benefits of a camp experience for everybody. I was going to say for a child, Mandy, but we're not. We're talking about the benefits of camp in general.
We're talking big picture. Yeah.
So, Mandy, what are the benefits of going to camp?
There's so many lovely benefits to going to camp. And I think one of the greatest ones is the really foundational of being in the environment, being in the natural environment that's available for being in camp spaces. So just a real quick one is to recognize that our bodies receive passively a benefit by being around nature, all the things that are outside. It doesn't have to be far away from anyone's front door or back door or whichever door gets you outside. But being in trees and rocks and earth and that kind of stuff helps us really calm down what is known as the parasympathetic nervous system. So that the parasympathetic nervous system helps us process stimulus in our environment, often called stress, whether good stress or bad stress, and tells our body to prepare to fight, flight, or freeze. So to deal with that stimulus or that stress in a particular way. And we live in a time where that real animal, caveman-y person type approach doesn't make a lot of sense, but yet we still have that very much inbuilt system, the amygdala, that says, okay, I need to run away or I need to fight back on this thing. So an email, for example, can trigger that kind of stress response that makes you want to fight, flight, or freeze. And we really need to consciously use our frontal cortex to tell ourselves to settle the heck down and be calm and recognize that we're actually safe and that we can process these problems well. But the problem is that the add up during a day of stressors that come in leaves our body tense and full of hormones that makes us want to, either makes us totally exhausted. Well, it will. And it's not an either. It will make you totally exhausted, but also quite jittery and edgy. And there's certainly a bunch of research that talks about the effects of missing nature in terms of staying edgy or anxious on edge. So being able to get out into nature has an incredibly calming effect. So there's great research that talks to us about the reduction of anxiety, the reduction of low mood or depression, but also, getting rid of low mood and depression, but also about rumination. You know that loopy thing that your brain does that it just keeps going back to try to usually it's about trying to solve a problem or deal with an anxiety. Actually just being out with some trees, a bit of water sometimes, some rocks, some dirt, it helps reduce rumination as well. So there's incredible benefits for just getting outside. The cool thing is camps are often, especially overnight camps, provide a nature environment. Day camps, city camps, and the like also still present natural environments, even if they're a park or just stepping outside of the building. And this is positive too. In fact, the research tells us that looking at nature on a screen or through a window have positive effects. There's some amazing medical research that says if you're in a hospital, not a hotel, different kind of hotel, if you're in a hospital and you get a window view of something natural, your recovery rates are increased and the number of complaints in terms of ongoing symptoms come down.
Sure.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So even just, taking a moment and entertaining some nature is going to do you great things. And you don't have to be out in the wilderness to do that. So that's sort of a starting point, that camps have this incredible benefit or advantage. And when we talk about camps, and there's lots of research on outdoor education, outdoor learning, and that kind of thing, usually the priority is about developing relationship with self, relationship with community, and relationship with nature.
Yeah.
So there's an intentionality about connecting with nature, whether that's just finding shade on a hot day, or or it's about transport, getting from the cabin to the dining hall.
Yeah.
There is often and fairly frequently connection with nature. So that's a big tick. That's fairly inherent or intrinsic to camp. And then a lot of the research from there starts dealing with the relationship to self, relationship to community or to other. And that's where we see a lot of the psychosocial development benefits, interpersonal skill or ability improvements. And also we talk a lot about personal development. So how a person comes to understand who they are, their sense of self. Some of the big categories include things like learning and educational values, community development, like I said. And let's talk briefly, too, about social capital as being a big part of camp.
Right. That's a great idea. One other thing before we change direction and talk about the social stuff, Mandi, Beth and I saw someone from the Australian Camps Association present at the International Camping Federation, and they talked a lot about their studies about kids being in nature. That I want camp people to really understand that this study revealed that that the last time, so because kids go to outdoor ed because of school, less than there's a summer camp.
Yeah.
Which lots of stuff you and I can explain, but we don't need to. They found that kids, the last time a lot of those children had run anywhere was 360 days before, when they were at camp. And so children hadn't run. So they had noticed that the accidents spike at the beginning and then go back down, because kids aren't used to jumping, running, anything other than walking to the bus. And that was fascinating to me. And the other physiological effect was that they really hadn't spent time in nature. Like, I get it, walking to school is exactly what you're saying, does provide some of that, but it had been 360 days since they had looked at green stuff thoughtfully or intentionally.
Yeah, I think that's part of the catch. There's, I was recently reading some stuff because I did a week's lecture on technology in the outdoors, and does it help or hinder? It's contentious, and it's a debate that I think will continue to carry on. It's an unavoidable debate because of the constant evolution of technologies and how they can assist with learning and assist with supporting relationships with, for example, nature. I mean, lots of kids learn lots of facts by Googling them. My kids will ask all the time, can I look this up? I want to know what this sea creature is about. Well, this is a sea creature I'll probably never see with my eyes. But definitely, you want to learn more about nature. Let's do it. So we rely on technology. But that idea that being intentional or thoughtful is really, really important. And I know that's not news to you. I know this is something that if there was a soapbox, you would firmly stand on and preach for. The intentionality makes a very, very big difference. In fact, we should talk about the intentionality of the research itself. When benefit research is being conducted, the intention is to find out about benefits. And so they do. And sometimes benefit research, because there's so much of that and so little of anything else in the camp research world, it fails to recognize that there's lots and lots more things to look at and think about and be curious about in terms of the camp experience. So benefit research is brilliant and important, and I don't expect we'll ever stop doing it. But there's more than just camp benefit research. What we did touch on there, though, for a second, is that idea of the relationship, and that kids don't necessarily have a lot of intentional or guided focus towards building a relationship with nature and natural places. That it's more of a sort of like a landscape you move through rather than a relationship you hold.
Right.
And there's amazing research, a lot more of it happening in the outdoor education world, in geography and planning, some of it in child and youth development spaces, but about the idea specifically that we live in an ecology, we live in a relationship with nature, and nature therefore becomes, if you can treat it like a relationship, a child, a son, a daughter, a parent, an auntie. Like if you start thinking about natural places as being on the same level as people relationships, it shifts the way that we relate to the story that we tell and what we can actually engender or socialize into children and youth in terms of the care they provide. You know, when you truly care about a person, there's a lot more to that relationship than a landscape you move through. So camp has a very, very big part to play. There's also some really fascinating research, and I know I'm all over the joint in terms of research. I get too excited talking to you, Travis, about physical literacy. And that idea of being able to coordinate all the bits of your body to do the things, to do all the things.
Yeah.
And when children play, when they run and they fall and they get scrapes and, like you said, that peak before they get there, oh yeah, this is how my legs work on rocky terrain. Oh yeah, this is how my body sits in a boat without flipping it. That's called, or sometimes termed, physical literacy. And I remember being at a conference, this might have been a decade ago, and they were talking about risky play, about the idea of play that actually causes injury, that has the risks, that there's a real potential is held in it. And it was two different speakers. They were both out of New Zealand, and there are contexts for why risky play is easier to do in a place like New Zealand because of national insurance scheme. There's one national insurance scheme. So it means people are covered.
Like health insurance, you mean?
Yeah, but like it covers injury and illness and all the things. That's why New Zealand's one of the few places where you can do tons and tons of bungee jumping. It's because if you have an injury or some kind of issue come up, you apply to a singular insurance scheme. Therefore, there's consistency in terms of its how it's delegated out. And so there was some space there's that litigation fear is somewhat removed. And so you can do a little bit more perceptively risky things. And so they were developing these playgrounds where kids had boards and nails and hammers and old tires and it was not a flat surface and there was tons of trees and branches were everywhere, and the kids would get together, totally unstructured, in terms of what kind of play they took up, and they built stuff and they made stuff and they took risks together. And what they found is that the more kids do risky play, the better their physical literacy, the better their perceptions of space, the less injuries they actually had, because they understood where the limits were. And it was internalized, not just in their mind, but in their bodies, like their fibers, their muscle fibers could remember that risk and that fall. So, I mean, these are some of the things that camps can provide and need to be very clever about providing. I recognize that insurance is always a challenge. I heard some murmurings that more and more insurance companies are raising their premiums or withdrawing from supporting camps or covering camps. If that's you in your camp at the moment, can I point you to another Australian interesting resource? It's called the Uploads Project. It was a research project initially. Now there's a bit more public interaction with it, where people would, from any outdoor education site across the country, could upload an incident report of an incident that went on. And this research center was analyzing risk and then reporting risk, so that instead of this idea of camps are risky, it statistically showed just how unrisky they really are. And although this fact is very Australian, the risks were far higher for playing cricket on a Saturday by getting bopped in the head by a cricket ball. And that's like a hard ball. That's like a hard baseball. Way, way, way more risky to do grassroots kind of, community level cricket on a Saturday than going to camp. Camps actually control a lot of that environment. It's the perception of risk that they make happen rather than real actual risk being present. And so that let places like Australia argue with insurance to say, actually, we're not that risky. And you'll insure cricket because it's considered a national institution. but you're, withdrawing from us. Well, let's show you the statistics. We're far more safe. And that was a really, really big turning point in terms of
benefit.
how, outdoor education centers got to continue.
Right on.
Scheduling affects every camper and every staff member's summer. It's easy to make mistakes, and it takes a ton of time. Bottom line, scheduling is hard, but it doesn't have to be. Let Camptivities help you create a balanced and engaging schedule without the mistakes and without those long days and late nights. Here's what Camptivities has to offer: auto scheduling, camper scheduling, group scheduling, elective scheduling, manual adjustments, over 50 different reports, tons of customizable settings, and so much more. If you're looking for a better way to schedule this summer, they would love to show you the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. Let Camptivities help you get away from your desk and back out to camp.
So we sort of skipped over some of the developmental benefits in going to some of the physiological stuff, and that's my fault. I took us there. What are some of the things that, because the purpose of this podcast is for camp people to be able to talk to their families, to potential donors, etc. Now we were adding insurance companies to that list.
Why not?
What are some of the developmental benefits that have been proven at camps?
Yeah. I think, like I said, it's sort of a 3-pillar approach, right? And so we've talked a bit about that that relationship to nature, but that idea of relationship to self and relationship to others. So some of my own research has been looking at the interpersonal abilities, skills, and development, but also, and that's wide extending. That's everything from conflict management to managing expectations, to teaching, learning relationships. That includes how children and youth learn how to be in relationship with one another in respectful and meaningful ways. It can be everything from consent in terms of like physical touch, physical being, to understanding socially appropriate cultural values, how we respect one another in terms of our differences. Camps have for a very long time squashed lots of very different people together. And because of the sort of the organizational culture of it, the value of inclusivity, it's meant that people have learned through personal experience what difference can look and feel like and how to live in a respectful way. And live, not just like show up for an hour meeting and not crack any inappropriate jokes. Like really the hard test is the nitty gritty of being in each other's physical space every day, day in, day out. So, I mean, there's incredible benefits to that sense of learning relationships and relationships that are respectful. And I mean, arguably this is an anecdote, but it's that idea of like trundling off to university for the first time, living in residence, and actually being equipped and prepared to live in that kind of living, that kind of community. You know, it's down to the details of the phone rang, I took a message, it's on your whiteboard, versus the phone rang, I blew them off, I couldn't tell you who called. You know, like that kind of like respectful responsibility for what it means to share living space. And then we can jump over to the psycho-emotional or the psychosocial, the idea of how an individual starts to understand their sense of identity. I mean, there's tons of theorists, and of course I'm going to lean on my sociology ones, but how we understand ourselves arguably is in context. We don't. If we were left in a room alone, from the moment we were born, there's a really good chance that we really never would develop a sense of identity. It's kind of like the echoes, and the echoes of this is who I am bouncing off the walls of this is who my people or the people who surround me are, helps us figure out what of that shape, define kind of the lines, the boundary lines of identity. So, I mean, that's Goffman, that's a particular theorist. There's lots of different theorists. So arguably that's not the be all and end all of the story. Yeah. But learning your own identity is something that happens in relation with your context, and camps can often change the context. And that is meaningful. It gives people opportunities to try on identity or the performance of identities before they decide whether or not that's who they are. I'm the shy kid, but I got to camp. I'm going to try out being outgoing. Do I like it? Is it comfortable? Do I have the energy for this? Am I built for this kind of being? Right. And then making decisions about how how much of that you take on, how much you don't. And taking it home, trying it out in a new echo chamber, trying it out in a different place. So camps provide novelty in that sense. They provide a different culture in that sense, but they also provide opportunity for, if you can imagine a bit like a dress-up room. Here's all the different costumes. Which one do you want to try at?
Yeah.
So there's tons of research that support all of these different things.
Right. So tell me, we've talked about the things that have been found in camp, and it's very popular or reassuring to camp people to have that benefits research exists out there and that they can translate that for their families. But what are we missing in camp research? What are the aspects of camp that are not being studied enough?
Well, look, everybody has a different opinion. I have my own, so I'll share that. I think
you've got the mic, so today,
right. Oh, geez,
it's the Mandi
responsibility, the privilege, and the responsibility. So it's important to remember that when research sets out, any kind of research sets out to find a thing, the researchers will write a framework, a structure of what they're trying to achieve. And then they will set a method, a recipe for how they're going to achieve that. Every one of those steps along the way involves a number of different decisions. And those decisions set you up more and more to find out the thing you want to find out. So if I was trying to find out the benefits of camp. And I think it's important to say here, camps operate in so many different environments with so many different populations.
Right.
That at any given time, I think what camp managers and decision makers and leaders are asking me when they ask me to do research is to help them hone in on what their special, unique context offers their special, unique population. And that it's at times daunting for those individuals to then dig into hundreds of journal articles or reports about camp benefits in a generalist sense and make sense out of what their specific time and space is offering their specific people. So I think that's the first really important thing is if you're listening and you want to get into camp benefit research to help support what you're saying, setting the parameters for your search, much like how a researcher sets the parameters for their search when they're collecting data, is going to be really important. Set the parameters as tight and as close as possible to your unique setting. So what I mean by that is if you're running a camp for a specialized medical group, so a group of patients or siblings of patients, a particular kind of experience, go looking for that particular group in terms of research. I mean, there are whole reams of research on 4-H. I often see that comes across my desk. I'm surprised, but very delighted. They do a lot of evaluation research along with new programs. A lot of medicalized group research is often done in nursing and medical journals. So you're going to have a real medical flavor to the way that the research was done. Regardless, the point here being that when a researcher goes out to find out a thing, they will set the parameters for finding that thing. And if what they're looking for is the emotional support or the emotional support skills that an individual develops within themselves through camp, that's what they're going to find out about. And they're not going to notice, for example, potentially the contributing factors of the home environment leading up to going to camp.
Gotcha.
Or they might they might not recognize, they might not even be able to pick up data on what the kitchen staff said that inspired that camper outside of a program, right? Because what they're looking for is they're setting the parameters. And when you set your parameters, you can only sort of see what's within it. In a researchy sense. So a lot of research on camps to date have been very focused on benefit. And by consequence, they might not actually record the opposite when something's harmful or damaging or when camp isn't great. There's not a lot of camp research that starts with and how is camp not great? And I don't expect a lot of funders want that kind of research. It doesn't do well. It doesn't bode well for an industry who, unfortunately, has probably suffered from being undervalued for its entire existence. The assumption that it's childcare, the assumption that it's recreation. So the staff must be having as much fun as the kids. The assumption often that kids are somehow like containable creatures and that they leave all their problems at home and they just show up as these lovely, compliant, docile little blobs. So there's an undervalue and underestimation of the degree of social, mental, physical support that is given to children, that children would even need it. You talk to any teacher, they'll tell you about this stuff. It happens all the time. And so it tends to be a very undervalued kind of industry. So a lot of research effort has been to provide support, evidence, its value. And there hasn't been a lot of space for what are we getting wrong. The challenge about the bonus, the benefit of what are we getting wrong research is when you can see what you're getting wrong, you can also see what you're getting right.
Right.
They're not separate entities. They're part of the same thing. So it's kind of like looking at a picture and what's in the foreground, what's in the background. Yeah. You couldn't see what was in the foreground if you weren't aware of the background. The two will always, it's a relationship within context. So there's not a lot of research looking at some of the hard and tough conversations and aspects about camp. As an example, we know that this idea of breaking free of old assumptions of heteronormativity, so the idea that girls and boys, men and women will always look for the opposite sex as a desirable romantic partner, and that by consequence, we set up camps to keep them separate, so no dodginess is happening. That model doesn't work for a portion of our population. And that portion of the population is understood better and heard more than it ever has before. And yet camps go, I don't know what to do with this problem. And so I can understand feeling overwhelmed and paralyzed by the idea, especially because this one comes as far as infrastructure. The buildings don't make sense anymore. How we've built camps don't necessarily make sense for this new kind of need to be inclusive. And yet that's the contradiction. Camps have been a wildly inclusive space and have shouted from the rooftops about its culture of belonging. And yet our buildings send a message that says, but you and you don't belong. And I don't know what to do with you. When we say, I don't know what to do with this problem, that message can sound like, I don't know what to do with you. So that's a perfect example of our history in camps going on without any kind of critical conversation. And then probably in the last 5 to 10 years, that critical conversation is coming up to the surface, and we still haven't, to some degree, turned back on ourselves and gone, okay, we've got a history that kind of painted us in a corner. How do we unpick this and make good sense for now and the future? So that's an example.
Yeah, that's great.
Give yourself a huge helping hand this summer with Michael Brandwine's 5 Fingers of Fantastic Staff Training. Without the need to travel and from the comfort of your home or office, you can gain control of your staff training prep through his interactive and engaging online seminar. Michael's annual Brandwine on Training, the step-by-step system for planning and presenting your best staff training ever, isn't a boring webinar. Michael uses the same techniques and tools from his in-person trainings, but in a virtual space, bringing folks together from around the world. Join Michael in ACA, Illinois this March 26th and 27th. Learn more about this and other Michael Brandwine seminars with ACA, Illinois at acail.org/Michael Brandwine. And don't delay, early bird rates end February 1st.
So, Mandi, if people are looking, they're interested, you have inspired them to be more interested in camp research. Where are some places? I think we both have some spots in the document, things we want to talk about. What do you recommend?
Look, we've talked about it before. It's not always easy to get your hands on academic research because they're behind paywalls or firewalls. Well, paywalls, really. I've spoken before about open access journals like the Journal of Youth Development, but there's also some workarounds. So I think I might have mentioned this before, but if not, here it is. Google Scholar. So Google Scholar is a Google search engine, but it searches all academic journals that it can find. It won't give you access, but it should give you the abstract. And then if you read it, which is about a paragraph, 200 words long, if you read that and you think, I love this, you can email the author directly and they can send you a preprint. So if they say to you, I don't have copyright, you can ask for something called a preprint, which is the copy before the publisher accepted it. So it might have a few grammatical errors, or they might have deleted something or added something new. It would usually be very, very minor, but you can ask for that very, very kindly. The other workaround is things like academia.com or researchgate.com. This is where researchers, usually this is meant for networking amongst ourselves. But so you kind of get pushed to sign up. You don't have to publish anything to be signed up, but to sign up, you can then often authors will just attach their preprints to their profile. So you can go in there and you can find them, but there's also official requesting mechanisms in those different sites. So those are a couple options. There was a very, very big study published by the American Camps Association. It's called the National Camps Impact Study. It spans from 2017 to 2022, which is as recent as you can get your hands on any kind of reporting in North America that I know of. Unfortunately, Canada has not been able to keep up pace with this. And this has to do with how the governing organizations have organized themselves or stumbled and had their moments in the last whatever decade. But hopefully we're steadily trying to amass Canadian research together so that there would be a sort of an entity that could also be a hub of communication. And with that, by the way, the American Camps Association has a research and evaluation council. I sit on that council. The people who sit on that council are just, like, I could fangirl about them. They're just so freaking amazing. So also something to look out for is the work that comes out of the research department at ACA. They're doing a lot of amazing projects at the moment, as well as that council in terms of contacts and researchers. How about you? Where would you go looking?
Well, there definitely is, although it's true the Canadian Camps Association doesn't have the same, hasn't been able to pull together the same, just the way camps are organized in our country is much different than being organized under one national organization. But there is stuff on the CCA website, the Canadian Camps Association website. That's a great one. Also, recently I have met and really enjoyed speaking with Jake Sorensen from sacredplaygrounds.com. And Jake and his team are doing a lot of really cool stuff on faith development, definitely very Christian focused faith development. But I have an answer to that too in my next one. But I've been talking to Jake. Their research is really interesting. How camp affects the lives, particularly in their case of Christian children. The answer to that in one way is that there are some big organizations that are supporting research in Jewish camp world. So certainly the Foundation for Jewish Camps is one, and they have a page called Campopedia, which is their hub for research. The other one is jcamp180.org. And they're also funding some research and pulling some research together. It's not their primary focus, but there's interesting stuff in there that you can find. And so both of those, I think, so those three things are ones that aren't specifically academic ones, but bigger organizations thinking, how do we talk about camp? Which is why Mandi and I are doing what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything you want to say, Mandi, to inspire people to explore the benefits of camp based on what people are writing or studying?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest question, I mentioned that before, that comes to me is often, certainly about asking if I'll come in and do some research with them, is what they're really looking for is a way to articulate the very uniqueness of their camp for their population. Yeah. And I guess a couple of things that I would encourage people to do is, like I said, if you can get yourself into a bit of the literature, get a sense of what other people are saying about your unique situation. They'll never know exactly your context and your people, but literature is fairly good and research is fairly good at painting a bigger picture and giving you a sense of like how something similar would work. Some studies are able to generalize. They can speak more directly to you. Others are going to be maybe more specific, but will resonate. And that may also give you then language to articulate what's so great about your particular space. The second thing I would say is you don't necessarily need research to talk about what you're doing being great or need it
Sure.
to be super specific to your site. It's okay to, when you're well informed, when you get educated and read a little bit of what other people are doing in literature, you can use that to support what you're doing without necessarily going through to have me as a consultant to run a very particular piece of research like that, it's time consuming when we follow our formula right, and time consuming equals cost. So what I would say is doing some good lit review and doing some really good sitting and listening with your own people to put language to something you feel confident you're doing. Then what I would say is that's when something like evaluation research makes a lot of sense, like running a focus group of your own or running an evaluation piece of research of your own. And that's when I would say that's when you spend the money for someone like me to double check that your research design is going to produce the thing you were looking for, rather than having me trying to run an entire study, unless we're doing this under a granting kind of situation for federal granting, having someone like me come in and check that your survey is going to produce the information you're trying to find out. That's where the power is. That's a good way of doing it. And then you can be in a position to say with confidence, we've done our own evaluation and we can say that this is why we're so special. So this is why broadly the research says camp's great, but this is what we're doing that's unique and special. And I guess that's the overarching thing that keeps coming back to me. People want sometimes me to tell them why they're great, and the likelihood is that they know why they're great way better than I do. It's what they want is credibility and legitimacy, which I totally wholeheartedly agree, of having employed a process that can stand up as being worthy and credible and have some robustness against any kind of criticisms that come. So that would be my first takeaway is you can do it. You've got to do your homework. You got to punch the clock. You got to do a bit of homework, but that you can do it and you will speak better for your own space than probably anybody else. The other thing I would put out there is to challenge people to ask questions beyond just benefits. There's lots going on in camp.
Yeah, that's great. Mandi, if people want to follow up or ask you questions or hire you to do this kind of stuff for them, how do they get a hold of you?
They can find me at getlamped@gmail.com anytime they like.
That's great. That's great. Mandi, thank you so much for this. I appreciate your insights and all the work you've done to pull this together for the rest of us. That's awesome. And Camp Pros, if you didn't know, now you know. Go Camp Pro, way beyond the basics. Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.